Okay, so today I'm going to walk you through how to label the different structural elements of a poem. So we are going to be using a poem called I Met a Dragon Face to Face by Jack Prelutsky. So before we even read the poem, I'm going to first start by going over what a line is and what a stanza is. So these two structural elements focus on the physical appearance of the poem and how it's broken up, and it kind of contributes to how the poet is choosing to build or craft this poem. So let's start with a line. So remember, a line in a poem is a single line of text from left to right. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and highlight an example of a line in this poem. So the first line, I met a dragon face to face, that is a line of this poem. So a line isn't always a complete sentence. If you look at the next line in this, the year when I was 10, sometimes the poet will kind of break a sentence up so that it's on multiple lines. But it's just important to know that a line is just the text going from left to right, and then you keep going down and down. So I'm going to go ahead and label this as a line. And if you were asked to count how many lines were in a poem, you would say that this poem has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16 lines. So this poem is composed of 16 lines. All right, so the next structural organization piece we're going to look at is a stanza. So a stanza is a group of lines in a poem separated by a space. Okay, it's kind of similar to a paragraph if you're doing like narrative writing or something like that. So as you can see, there's two groups of lines in this poem with a space in between. So I'm going to pick a different color here, and I am going to go ahead and mark this one right here, this group of lines, as a stanza. So you can go ahead and label this as stanza number 1. Okay, so this poem does have a second stanza, so I'm going to go ahead and label that one as stanza number 2. So if you were asked to count the number of stanzas in this poem, you would say that there's 2 stanzas. Okay, and there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There's 8 lines in each stanza. Okay, so now we're going to move on to a couple structural elements that have to do with the sound of the poem as it's being read. Okay, so we're going to start by talking about rhyme scheme. So a rhyme scheme is the pattern of rhymes within a poem. So poets will often make the last words in their lines rhyme. Sometimes it's alternating, so like the first and third line will have rhyming words at the end, and then the second and fourth line will have rhyming words. There's kind of different patterns that you can study that way. We're not going to go really deep into that, but today we're just going to pick out a few words or a couple words that rhyme in this poem. Okay, so the rhyme also kind of helps create a rhythm in the poem and kind of make it more musical and just pleasing to read, and it gives it a good flow. So I'm going to start reading and you'll kind of see what I mean with the musical flow that is added with these rhyming words. So we're going to take a look at the first stanza. I met a dragon face to face, the year when I was 10. I took a trip to outer space, I braved a pirate's den. I wrestled with a wicked troll and fought a great white shark. I trailed a rabbit down a hole, I hunted for a snark. Okay, so as I was reading that, it flowed really easily because it has those rhyming words in it. So I'm just going to go ahead and identify 2 words from this poem that rhyme. There are quite a few, so I am going to, let's use green. And I am going to circle, let's do troll and hole. So those 2 words rhyme and kind of make those lines there have a flow. I wrestled with a wicked troll and fought a great white shark. I trailed a rabbit down a hole. Okay, so I am going to make a little note here that those, oops, let's do the same color. Those are an example of our rhyming words. Okay, and the last structural element we're going to talk about is repetition. So a poet sometimes uses repetition in their poem if they are repeating words, phrases, or lines for a purpose. So we're going to reread this poem. So we're going to start at the top and read through the rest of it. And then we're going to go back and note any words, phrases, or lines that repeat. So I'm going to grab a different color first. Let's use purple. All right. I met a dragon face to face the year when I was 10. I took a trip to outer space. I braved a pirate's den. I wrestled with a wicked troll and fought a great white shark. I trailed a rabbit down a hole. I hunted for a snark. I stowed aboard a submarine. I opened magic doors. I traveled in a time machine and searched for dinosaurs. I climbed atop a giant's head. I found a pot of gold. I did all this in books I read when I was 10 years old. Okay, so the first thing I noticed that's repeating over and over again is one word. It's actually a letter. Okay, it's the word I. So notice how I is repeating over and over. So that kind of tells me that it has some importance. And the importance that I'm pulling from this is that the author, Jack Perlutsky, is talking about himself. So he's saying that when he was a kid, he did all these different things in the books he read. So he probably read a bunch of different books that were about dragons or pirates or fighting sharks. And he's saying that like he kind of was able to imagine that he actually did these things because he read that book. So I is an example of repetition. Okay, and then the other thing I noticed is repeating is kind of just a phrase. It's phrased a little bit differently, but he talks about being 10. So I guess we'll circle that. So I was 10 and I was 10 years old. So that's another example of repetition. So I'm going to write repetition. Sorry, my handwriting's kind of messy on that. And then also the other example was the I, the pronoun that's repeating. Okay, so those are some examples of structural elements of poetry and how to kind of look at the poem a little bit more closely and label it in doing so. So make sure that you are copying down these notes and these labels on your blank copy of this poem in Notability. And then after that, make sure you take a screenshot of what you have completed. And then you will be inserting that picture into your Google Doc for that second part of your Tuesday assignment. And then the last thing you're going to be doing is looking at one more poem, and you're going to be labeling it like this on your own. Okay? All right.